This is a very simple online handwriting recognition system for the Japanese language. So you can see as I click and draw a stroke, the stroke is recognized as a horizontal stroke. You can support vertical strokes, diagonal strokes, and all these strokes are enabling the system to kind of determine what character that might potentially represent. So, for example, this character starting with a vertical stroke, followed by a special stroke that's actually one stroke, but it's right and then downward, followed by a horizontal stroke and another horizontal stroke. When we ask the system to recognize it, it gets recognized as the character for sun. And so you can see the system kind of takes a look at which strokes have been drawn in what order, and then searches down what's essentially in the back end a tree. And so you can think about each stroke as sort of a different path along this tree of kind of searching for what potential character would have these strokes in this particular order. That's one of the benefits of having the system target the Japanese languages, because in Japanese every character has a defined stroke order, and so the rules are pretty simple, and most writers of the Japanese language are taught these rules in school. And so there's certain rules that, horizontal strokes usually go first, and then vertical strokes, and go working from kind of the top left to the bottom right. And there's different edge cases, but in general it's good enough to work for this kind of a basic system. And so I have a bunch of different characters that are recognizable. That's one. Here's two. And here's three. And here's Earth. And so it's a combination of not only which strokes are happening in which order, but also where each stroke stops and starts in relation to each other. And so when a stroke starts, for instance, this bottom stroke starts kind of to the left of this other horizontal stroke and ends to the right of this other horizontal stroke. And that's information too that can also help us to identify each stroke. And so if we look at the code of what we're actually doing, for each particular stroke, we define different types of strokes. There's horizontals, verticals, right down, which is that hook stroke, the diagonal up, diagonal down. And we do some basic geometry, sort of. We're kind of looking at the angles here, and based on the angle, and we have a fudge factor of what's considered horizontal and vertical, we just kind of take a look at this of the math and see which kind of stroke it probably is. The only hard case is trying to determine a diagonal down stroke and this sort of other stroke that's kind of more of a hook, like we saw in the sun character. At the time I had decided that the easiest way to do that was to just kind of look at how horizontal the stroke was compared to how vertical it was. And that worked well enough for this small case, but as I probably increase the number of characters, that might start to fail on me. And so you can see here in the code where I add some sample characters, I just kind of for testing purposes just added, I would define each character by saying how many strokes it would have and then which type of strokes. So the entry for number 2, for example, for the character representing the numeral 2 has 2 strokes, and it has the first stroke being horizontal and the second stroke is horizontal. And then I also have a coordinate system that I created to kind of help define the relative positions of where each stroke should start and stop in relation to the other. And so by populating the tree, I call it the stroke tree here with this information, it allows me to kind of map the characters of the Japanese language to a certain extent, and then we can search it with the system. So overall, it was a lot of fun to build the system. I've always been interested in handwriting recognition, so it was really fun to kind of get to play around with it. But it definitely has some flaws. For example, if you don't do it in the right stroke order, then it's going to be hopeless trying to help you to find that character. And so foreigners or even some Japanese people that are native speakers might not be completely familiar with all of the rules and sometimes might draw a character in the wrong order. So developing the system that would be able to handle that would be a little bit more complicated. And I also would like to eventually someday investigate being able to apply machine learning to this as well, because being able to train a system with a lot of examples would also be able to make it an offline system as well, because right now it kind of requires the user to kind of draw it live as opposed to presenting it an image where it kind of has no idea which stroke was done in what order. So yeah, overall it was a really cool project, and you can go ahead and check out the code on my GitHub account if you want to see kind of what it looked like and how to do it if you want to try it out for yourself.